Welcome to Alchemos. I'm Colton, and this episode is about all the questions that I wish someone would ask Elon Musk. Let's get to it. Ooh, power outage. So I love Elon Musk. I think he's well on the way to changing the world. He already has. And I hope he lives for at least 150 years so that we can see some really cool shit at the tail end of this like exponential growth of technological innovation that he's got going on. But I've got this frustration. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Having watched almost everything that he's ever, all the videos of him that are online, all of the interviews he's done, everybody always asks him the same boring questions, like how many Model Ys are they going to release next quarter? Or do you think the stock price is too high? Or yeah, but what about the dangers of the self-driving cars and the political ramifications of the legalization? And it's just the same. They're trying to figure out super short-term, like how to capitalize, you know, on the price of Tesla, right? And that's the crazy thing. Like with everything that SpaceX is doing, the questions on the SpaceX and the Martian side, what I would generally consider like the bigger, like, you know, crazier side of Elon's businesses, it doesn't seem to get nearly as much attention as the publicly traded one, and I think that's telling. But anyway, so first question is about Neuralink, and this one, maybe there's something I don't know, but it might be a bit of a hardball, but I mean, it is what it is. So there is something called like electrical resonance, right? It's how wireless charging works. It's how radios work. It's how lots of things work. And I think it was like the 1850s, there was a solar flare. These happen relatively regularly, but this was a pretty big one. And a solar flare hit the Earth. Solar flare is when the sun goes and like burps a bunch of like those loops, the magnetic loops that form on the sun, when they like burp and spew a bunch of like plasma gas into space. And then so like that might happen, right? And then, you know, most of those, they're gonna miss Earth, but every once in a while one of those will hit Earth, right? So what happens when that happens? Like, is it a big one? Is it a little one? It depends, but it does happen. So in 1850 something, one of these hit Earth, and my understanding of it is that basically every telegraph in the world, like all of the wires in the world, caught on fire, right? So in like 1850, as they're just transitioning away from the Pony Express and they're just starting to electrify things, not such a big deal, but imagine what would happen today if all of the wires in the world caught on fire. Holy shit, right? But anyway, so my question is, what would happen to people with Neuralink if there was a solar flare? Would these wires in the brain be susceptible to electromagnetic resonance, and, you know, like, therefore and it doesn't have to be a solar flare. Like, what happens if somebody with Neuralink got electrocuted, right? Like, would their brain get electrocuted in a way that wouldn't normally happen because the skin level electrocution would then feed into the wires down into the brain? Are there possible something like an MRI? Would an MRI be dangerous? What are the limitations, like the physical limitations? And it may, I don't know, maybe these wires somehow, because they're made of some biomedical
material that I don't know anything about somehow wouldn't be but they have to be conductive to conduct electricity. So my understanding is that they would be susceptible to these electromagnetic frequencies, solar flares, right? So a solar flare would be like, what would happen if there was a solar flare and then suddenly all of like the smart, nerdy engineers in the world who have Neuralink, right? Elon, probably most of the Tesla and SpaceX engineers, right? And then depending on how far in the future this is, like maybe a lot of people, maybe most people, that's probably a ways away anyway, but what if all of them just like their brains exploded all at once, right? So, right? This is just, like, is there anything there? Like, these are my concerns, Elon. Can you assuage my fears here? I would appreciate it. Next question. Okay, so this is another SpaceX question. So there's an asteroid in the asteroid belt called 16 Psyche. This asteroid is basically made of gold, but it's not exactly gold. It's a bunch of very dense elements that are higher on the periodic table, and scientists believe that it is the old core of a dead protoplanet. So if there was a planet that had started to form, but then because of Jupiter and Earth got torn apart into the asteroid belt, that this 16 Psyche 16 may have been the original core of that planet. If this is the case, then it wouldn't be just gold. It would also be all of the radioactive materials that are heavy and sink towards the center in any planetary body that's large enough to have a geothermal type of situation, like a liquidification from the mass. If there's a solid core of heavy metals, then that was what was happening, most likely. Again, that's my understanding. I might be wrong about that, but if this is the case, clearly, so it's like, okay, maybe that's the first one we want to mine, and we can get so much gold, and Elon could, be the one to mine it because he got, he's got all his rockets and SpaceX, and he's rich, and this is the treasure that the God King of Mars uses to found the treasury, of the new planet, the new planet's colony, right? But what if we were able to take the radioactive materials from this core and add them somehow to the Martian core, thereby jump-starting the geothermal processes on Mars? I don't know if this is possible. Seems totally fucking crazy, but the reason, again, my understanding that we can't dig to the center of Earth on Earth is because you get 10 miles deep, through the crust and get to the mantle, and it starts to get hot as balls, right? There's a lot of geothermal heat from the radioactive materials that are down there. But the Martian planet, I don't believe it has so much geothermal heat. I think we might be able to dig much, much deeper. And this isn't, I'm not exactly sure how to think about it. What materials are there? What's the Martian mantle made of? How deep is it to the core? What's the hardness of the materials? Can we dig through this? Can you dig straight down, or do you have to go ahead and how long would it take? I don't know, but I think if we're trying to start a new planet, right, it may need a magnetic field, right? It's just Earth has one. We need it.
protects us from the radiation of the sun. I mean, I like the idea of going to Mars, but don't love the idea of living in caves, hiding from, you know, cancer my whole life. Like, maybe it would be, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's something there. Next question. There's a book, I believe it's by Kim Stanley Robinson, called Aurora. This is a great book. Spoiler alert. I mean, it's great sci-fi. I highly recommend anybody read it. Skip ahead to the next question. If you're interested in reading this great book, it's about a interstellar mission, like a group of like interstellar ships, right? And in this case, it's one. So the single interstellar ship, I think it has 2,000 people on it, and it has 16 separate biospheres, and like all the different animals. You know, it's like a Noah's Ark type of situation, except that it, you know, also includes like microbes and fungi and, you know, everything that they need to seed a new planet with, you know, Earth-like materials. But they start running into these really, like this single specific, really fascinating problem, which I think we're really going to run into when we start doing things like this, and that we're going to run into if we try to colonize Mars, which is that the smaller organisms with the shorter life cycles, right? So, I mean, even insects, but like, especially like bacteria, they evolve much quicker than the larger organisms, right? So, and if you've got, you know, 2 of every animal, so, you know, some giraffes and tigers and bears and, you know, like handful of people, like these creatures all live 30, 40, 80, 100 years, right? Bacteria can reproduce like several hundred times every day, you know, it's, and if they're evolving and they're evolving more rapidly, right? And then suddenly, you know, one of the bacteria finds a new evolutionary niche, right, where it can multiply rapidly by eating up all of the oxygen, right? I mean, that could cause serious problems in a small enclosed like biome, right? I think there was another, I forget what it was. They tried to do a biome on Earth to replicate this, you know, the idea of doing everything all in one place, like cutting off even oxygen and water and trying to keep it self-sustained, and it failed. Like, they weren't able to do it. So like, that's, I mean, if nothing else, like, that's a problem that we're gonna have to solve, you know, as well, going to Mars. And so what, like, I'd be very curious what, like, how is SpaceX thinking about solving these problems? Like, because they must, like, they're planning on sending missions in 2024 and 2026. So this is, I mean, this is near enough that you have to be thinking about what are we going to send, right? And this is one of those, I think there's like the obvious things we send, and then this is just beyond obvious. I've heard Elon say, well, we're going to need everything. We need, you know, factories and foundries and presses and pizza shops, and, you know, like, but like, how are we going to manage the microorganisms and the bacteria and the fungi, and like, how do we keep all of this under control? And what are the specific, like, how do we even think about this? Are we doing test facilities here? Should we do something like a fake encapsulated Martian colony on Earth to try to, you know, learn what we can here in order to inform the preppers? Like, is that happening somewhere? And
it's under wraps. Nobody's talking about it. I'd love to know more. Okay, this one I thought was a big deal, but then looking into it, it doesn't seem to be as big a deal as I thought it was. But my understanding about global pollution was that cargo ships make up a huge portion of the global pollution, and that they get around a lot of the carbon emission regulations by emitting their waste emissions into the ocean, like so down into the water rather than into the atmosphere. And then because the people who make the rules are lawyers and bureaucrats, and they're looking at how much is emitted into the atmosphere, boop, you got around the rules. But I was having trouble finding numbers to back up this belief that cargo ships are a huge problem. I originally thought that they were a bigger problem than like all of land transportation and all of, you know, planes and everything. I've heard Elon talk about electric planes, but the question is electric cargo ships. Like, I know you're overloaded. It's just like in terms of, you know, Tesla's mission to accelerate, you know, the use of renewable, you know, electric fuels and renewable resources. Have you considered doing anything on the cargo ship side of things, like a big electric cargo ship? I mean, is this possible, viable? Are there limiting factors that I'm not perceiving? Seems to me that it should be fairly straightforward. I mean, yeah. But anyway, so I'd be curious, just because it seems like the largest piece of the transition to a sustainable energy future that is currently missing from Tesla's portfolio. So have you considered looking into this? I mean, the other one being electric planes, but I've heard Elon talk about VTOLs. I know they're on the way. We're just waiting for battery technology to get to a high enough fuel density, and also other actors are already working on VTOLs. So this might be one of those things like Hyperloop, where somebody else does it so that Elon and Tesla don't have to. So, but still curious, is this possible? Is this doable? What do you think? Okay, so the Boring Company. Now, this one I do not understand, and maybe somebody could help me understand. Elon, with respect to the Boring Company, he only talks about tunnels for transportation. I've only ever heard Boring Company tunneling machines and tunnels being used for transportation, for either electric cars or Hyperloops. But I've also heard Elon talk about getting into mining, and it seems that a tunnel boring machine that can bore tunnels for 1/10 the cost of the existing tunneling machines would completely revolutionize the mining industry. There's all of the same advantages that that I've heard before about, because of the electric motors. You don't need all of the ventilation shafts, and you don't have to get rid of the diesel fumes. I mean, I've heard of all this, and then there's another company. I think it's a Cisco, a Canadian mining equipment manufacturer, has started to create a product that's similar to this. So this is a thought I've had for a while, and I saw them, and they're making electrically driven boring machines specifically for mines. And then they have this really cool, like, conveyor belts on the waste material with like an X-ray, and there may be more sensor to the X-ray. Might be a little bit smarter than just an X-ray, but then the X-ray classifies the material, and so like high quality ore goes over here, low quality ore goes over here, and this helps. I mean, it automates a lot, and just allows for tunneling and mining to happen much faster, much cheaper, lower manpower. I mean, it seems, but I don't see why Tesla couldn't do it as well, and you know, maybe not better than anybody else. So that seems huge. The other one is that I wonder if the Boring Company could be used just as like a real estate application to use the tunnels as space, as rooms, and to create tunnels, you know, I mean, maybe like loops of tunnels with elevator shafts or something, and within already, you know, like under cities, like in highly dense areas where the real estate is really high already to maybe justify the cost of the tunnels. But it seems like there's potential there as well, and I might just be wrong about the numbers, but I suspect that there's something we could do here. Back to Mars. I basically asked most of this already. Yeah, so what I have written is, besides industrial equipment, what SpaceX's comprehensive list of life support equipment critical for a human over a 10 to 100 year time period. So this gets to that idea of like long life cycles. We're not talking about sustaining people for, you know, months or a year or two, but lifetimes, right? And the types of like how are we planning for the types of problems and difficulties, right? Like that are going to evolve out of you know, life on like a foreign rock millions of miles away from home and from, you know, easy access to resupply. I mean, I know every 2 years you'll have resupply, you might be able to do it, but still, I'm just like, what does that whole thought process look like? And this is a different idea. So I have this theory, I haven't heard it elsewhere, but I'm sure I'm not the only person that's ever thought this, that it may be that because humans evolved on Earth, well, so let me back up. There is a, yeah, because humans evolved on Earth, that we may be, you know, very specifically essentially designed or evolved for Earth's specific environment. And a lot of this, you know, like temperature, oxygen, you know, like we can reproduce on Mars, and I think that's, or on a spacecraft to Mars, or on a spacecraft to another star or something. I understand this, but I've never heard anybody talk about like the possibility that we might be like reliant somehow, maybe psychologically, on the Earth's magnetic field. And I have seen, it seems that the Earth's magnetic fields, human brainwaves fluctuate widely, but there's basically like two states of brainwaves that are conscious, like, and then two states of brainwaves that are sleeping. So there's like sleep, deep sleep, and then conscious, and then like hyperactive flow state, you know, athlete, high performance type of thing. So there's a level, and the Earth's magnetic fields seems to be right in between, right on the line between consciousness and unconsciousness. So I suspect that that's not just a coincidence, that we, similarly to the way that the yellow of the sun that happens to be right in the middle of the color spectrum, that the brightest light emitted from the sun is right in the middle of the color spectrum of our eyes. So our eyes evolved around the sun, right? Like, that makes sense. But what if our brains evolved around the Earth's magnetic field? But the thing is, like, if this is true, then it's not hard to artificially create a magnetic field. I wonder if we might have to do that, and I haven't heard anybody suggest that possibility before. So I just wanted to note that. And then Joe Rogan asked this question on the last podcast, where he sadly admitted that he had never seen one of the SpaceX rockets land, which, like, I feel like I saw Elon's soul get crushed when he heard that. But Joe went on to ask about physics and aliens, and is there a potential for like a gravity drive and things like this. And Elon was pretty dismissive, but I think Joe just lost him before this and didn't have the technical knowledge to really frame the question for Elon. So the question is, because Elon does a really good job at, like, they don't invent, I mean, the material science, they are doing this, but they don't seem to invent new technology. They put existing technology, they push it to the limit, and then they put it together to create a new device, right? So, like, no part of the rocket that lands itself, from my understanding, was like a new invention, but the way that all the components were put together and the goal, and then actually achieving that goal, like, that's what was all new. But it does seem to me, because it's not apparent to me that we know all of the physics. I think we know a lot of physics, but not everything closes nicely. There's some spots where it's clear there are holes in our theory, and I don't see why it would be impossible for us, upon discovering some new paradigm in physics, to potentially be able to do something like manipulate the Higgs boson, which is the particle that gives particles their mass, and essentially gravity, in a similar way that we learn to manipulate the electron, and then from that create all of electronic and electromagnetic devices, right? So it's just like one understanding of one paradigm shift can yield mind-blowing changes, and I'm not convinced that we have discovered everything, and there's a lot that we can do beyond what we are doing with what we already have discovered, and that's what Elon has been crushing it at. But it seems to me that it might make sense to, like, wouldn't it make sense for SpaceX to dedicate some of their resources towards, like, R&D, and specifically like paradigm shifting new physics, right? And the engineering applications that might evolve from that.
I would. One of the things about this that I think would be so exciting is that Elon is a physicist, and he's also brilliant with capital allocation. And I have to believe that the way that he would allocate capital and the projects that he would choose to fund and the specific research that he would pursue would be so much more efficient than the way the government just tends to throw money at these problems, you know, in the big like Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories or, you know, in the big national, you know, Los Alamos laboratories and etc. So I would love to see what Elon, like what type of research divisions or research projects would Elon create, and how would they function? How would they function differently than the existing ones? And because if we could figure out, you know, how to, like, a gravity drive that just manipulates gravity instead of using, you know, chemical rockets, right? I mean, this might change the game, and we might be able to get to and from Mars much quicker. Like, this might totally simplify everything. And I don't know, maybe it's not possible. It's on Joe Rogan, he seemed to be very dismissive. He seemed to think, no, it's not possible. And that confused me, because I don't see why it's not possible. So if nothing else, I would wonder, I would like to know why specifically Elon believes that that's not possible. But I think maybe he thinks it is maybe possible, but it might not be, and that it's more efficient to allocate capital in the way that we're guaranteed to push what we have, instead of wasting capital, potentially wasting capital, probably wasting capital on something that might change the whole paradigm, but probably won't. That's what I think Elon believes, but it's not exactly what he said. So I was a little confused. I would love it if he could clarify that. And mostly, I wish that the press, right, the people that get to interview Elon would ask some more interesting questions than the same ones that they ask over and over again. So anyway, that's it. Tune in next time. Alchemos, over and out.